Hi, my name is Dominic. I'm a pharmacy technician and pharmaceutical science student going into my second year, thankfully. And one of the hardest things from transitioning from work to full-time education again was just time management, because I was so used to at the time just going from home to work and sometimes studying, and it was quite simple back then. But then as soon as university hit, it became 5-day weeks and I had to take off time off work. And then during the break times, I would just go back to work again and again. And I didn't think I found the balance at first. And it never got in the way of any of my studies. I made sure everything was done on time, but I realized that if I continued this way, I'd burn myself out, which I eventually did for a short time. And then I came to and realized it's time to just enjoy the breaks for what they are. And it's time for rest and recovery and stuff like that as well. And although I have things to do outside, I have many a hobby, but obviously sometimes it's just good to just stay at home or go for just a nice walk somewhere, go to the beach and just let it all go and forget about it. Another thing about transitioning from work to uni, you have a lot more independence, but that can also be seen as a bad thing, because when you're going to university, your lecturers are not there to ideally take your hand and carry you through the course. If you have any questions or you're struggling, you have to ask the right questions. Thankfully, I was assigned a tutor, personal tutor at the start of the year. All of the students on my course got one. But as with any tool, it's how you use it. So I made sure that I was in regular communication with my tutor anytime I had any issues with handing in work or finding equipment for certain topics or research books, anything like that. I made sure that my personal tutor was up to date with everything. And it's all right to pester them, because that's what they're there for, but also it demands a lot of attention to detail, especially if you want to make sure you pass the year with some flying colours. Yeah, I like the idea of just following through with that. My tutor was very, very helpful, but you cannot rely on everyone's just goodwill, because when I was in this year, the first year after I did the foundation, I found a different tutor, and they weren't as, I would say, approachable. Not hostile, just not as approachable. So I had to make sure that I chased them up a lot. I had to find them in the office and ask them questions. And they weren't as helpful at the time, but as with most things, you warm up to them and you kind of understand each other's strengths and weaknesses and fill in the gaps with the resources available to you, such as the library and your colleagues, i.e. your fellow students. And another thing is, when you go from work to university, it's a bit more of a social environment, so you're allowed to mingle with people a bit more in a non-professional environment. And I found that, not the social part hard, but not speaking to people as if I'm at work, which is quite hard sometimes. But I'm glad that I finally kind of got over that and just continued, really. What else is there? Exams at the end of the year. So after you finish your coursework at the end of the year, depending on what course you're doing, it comes to exam season. So you have to learn how to revise all over again. And because the pharmacy technician course at the time was heavily coursework based, we didn't have that many exams. But in this case, it was half exams, half coursework. So I had to find a new technique on how to revise. And I look back to GCSE A-level days and how I used to do it. And it didn't always work, but as with most things, you have to trial and test it. So I'd go to the library to try and do some silent study and realised that didn't work. And then I did some group work, and there's always ups and downs with that. You have to make sure everyone's on time for study group, otherwise it all just falls apart. And what I really found that worked was doing practice papers. The only downside to that is if the course changes the exams for the next year. So during COVID, they changed the exams completely to match the environment. So a lot of things were more online and the questions were specifically for that year group. So you couldn't look back and see how everyone answered those questions. But it's important to stay in regular contact with your lecturers where you can. Also speak to students that are in the year above you to get some advice on how to look for the answers that you need, and just remaining focused as much as you can and keeping a healthy work-life balance. So yeah.